Yeah, so anyway, my name is Patty Manning. Thanks for the introduction. I'm going to talk to you today about the vegetation that I have observed thus far on and around the Hovey Dome formation on the Boot Ranch in Brewster County. And this is an ongoing project. I've been working on it for a couple, maybe 3 years now, but a lot of the time has been so dry, as Michael indicated earlier, that I know that there's a lot more species that I'm going to encounter, hopefully this fall, and now that there's been a lot of moisture out there. But anyway, the Boot Ranch is located about 20 miles, más o menos, northeast of Alpine along Highway 67 on the way to Fort Stockton. It's owned by Ann Calloway, a delightful woman who owns Front Street Books here in Alpine, and also is co-owner of the currently being renovated Ritchie Hotel, a historic building on the south side of the tracks. She and David Keller, the archaeologist, are working on that. And the ranch has been in her family since about the 1930s, and was formerly under her mother's family's name of Strauss, but now it's called the Boot Ranch. The building that you see there is the ranch house, and it was formerly the railroad depot at Hovey, which is a little community, defunct community now, a little bit north of the ranch. The South Orient Railroad went through there, and there was at one time a school and a store and a depot. And I think it was her grandfather, and she's here, she can correct me if I'm wrong, that moved the building from Hovey to its current location on the ranch by mule, and then renovated it into a dwelling. Oops. This picture was I got ahead of myself on moving the picture, but the ranch was traditionally a cattle ranch, and there still are on the ranch a small herd of cattle, one of which you see in this picture that snuck up on me one morning when I was out there. And it was amazing how, how quiet such a big animal can be. It kind of scared the pee-waddin' out of me, but he was just curious. Anyway, the other thing that the ranch supported over the years was hunting leases, which is no longer the case. Whoops. This is the hunting lodge that exists on the ranch. It's a really nice building inside and out. The family hunts still on the ranch, but they don't do leases anymore. You know, and there's mule deer on the ranch and elk. I managed to run across this elk on the right-hand side of the screen there one day. It was kind of far away, so it's a little bit of a hazy picture. And then came across this elk antler shed. Never found the other one, but anyway, it's all part of what makes exploring this ranch interesting to me. The other really fascinating thing about this ranch, and there's many fascinating things, but there are a lot of archaeological features and artifacts on the ranch. And in January of 2019, Anne commissioned the Center for Big Bend Studies in primarily David Keller and his associates to do surveys on the ranch of all these archaeological features. And I don't know how many they've encountered thus far or documented thus far, but it's pretty amazing. Earthen ovens, middens, points like the one I found here on one of the few igneous prominences on the property. And then the picture on the left, on your left here, is what David told me was a earthen oven that's being gradually exposed as this arroyo erodes. I guess it got covered up and now it's being re-exposed. So it's pretty, it's kind of makes it more fun for me walking around the property, looking at plants, just to know that there's you know, from maybe 5,000 years ago to 500 years ago, there were indigenous peoples moving through this piece of property. And it's also kind of interesting because now there isn't any surface water on the property. You have to dig pretty deep to get well water. And I don't know whether in some ancient time there were springs or what have you, but in any case, people did move through there at least temporarily. This is something I came across at the base of a hill where there's a water tank. And I don't know whether this was an old conduit that a rancher put in or not, but you know, since I've been apprised of the fact that there are features on the property, you know, from whatever era, you know, you kind of see these things that look like they were artificially constructed. And I have no idea what this is, but it intrigued me. So the formation on the ranch that I've been focusing on in the vegetation study is the Hovey Dome. And it's a geologic dome that I'm not going to try to attempt to explain because I'm not a geologist. But it's comprised of a series of low limestone hills that are more or less 4,000 feet in elevation, a little bit higher than that in some instances. And you can see on this slide, the way the limestone hills look from the highway as you're driving up towards Fort Stockton. Because of the nature of a geologic dome, apparently there's always a possibility that there is oil to be found underneath. And, you know, again, I'm not a geologist, so I'm probably slaughtering it. But at one point in time in the early part of the 20th century, there was oil exploration on the property. And in this slide, you can see sort of the remains, historic artifacts of one of the oil wells that was on the property. They never did find oil, apparently, and that isn't going to be something that's going to happen in the future. But there are just, you know, all this stuff strewn around in relation to that endeavor, and you can kind of see the desert sort of taking back some of that, that area around there. And this is just a shot of one of the limestone hills. So you can kind of get an overview. And you know, again, a lot of these slides were taken during periods when it was really pretty dry. So it's kind of hard to tell the potential, but here's another shot of one of the hills where you can kind of see some of the strata up at the top, these little ledges that crop up. And then another shot of a different hill where you can see some other kinds of strata. There's several different eras or strata of limestone, and I think they're mostly Cretaceous. And again, I'm not gonna go there, but but there does seem to be a little bit different plant community in each strata. There's a lot of overlap, of course, but there are some plants that occur more prevalently in some strata than others. And this is sort of a close-up of a couple of the different outcrops that you'd see. The one on the right, I think, is Buda limestone, but maybe Lynn can shoot that out, can shoot that notion down when he speaks later. And then the more crumbly white-colored limestone there. And I've kind of broken up the talk about the plants into some real general sort of habitat types on the ranch. And there are a lot of, especially in my exploration thus far, there's a lot of really deep, kind of interesting drainages, sort of mini canyons or deep arroyos that occur that are sort of gradually eroding these limestone hills. And so I'm going to start out with the vegetation that I've noticed in some of those drainages. And so these are just sort of general shots of some of those. And some of them are, you know, exposed. Some of these drainages expose some real bedrock, and some have, you know, more like ledges coming up the sides or gradual slopes. This is just another shot of another couple of the drainages kind of showing some of the different rock outcrops. And I think this picture here on our left is, I believe that's a mountain laurel. And then there's, there's some plants that occur in the drainages that occur up on the uplands, including sotol, which is, you can see in the right-hand picture. In this case, it's Dazzlerian texanum or Texas sotol, which you find more commonly on limestone. One of the interesting populations that are found in the drainages and not necessarily up higher on the property are what I'm calling moor oaks, Quercus mooriana. But with the oak work that's being done now, who the heck knows what it is? In a lot of instances, moor oaks are considered shin oaks. They're colonies of short shrubs. But in these drainages, you find they're more arborescent. They're more tree-like. Now, they're not huge trees, granted, but they're still, 20 to 25 feet tall. This is kind of a close-up of the acorns that came from the moor oak, some of the moor oaks on the property. That was in 2019, and even though it was dry, it was a particularly good mast year. And so I collected a lot of acorns there, some of which I grew out, some of which I was successful in growing out. And the other on the left here is a shot of the tree, one of the moor oaks in flower and in the spring, in the April of 2019. Another population of plants that grows sort of more or less in association with those moor oaks, and this is M-O-H-R, by the way, not moor oaks. This is a mountain mahogany, Cercocarpus breviflorus, and it surprised the heck out of me. I guess I just haven't been out and around enough to realize the different kinds of habitats that mountain mahogany can be found in. I associated it always with mountains, but this is a species that grows down in these drainages, and it's fairly common. On the right, you see an example of what really must be a very old one. It's probably the biggest one I've ever seen. And then on the left is a close-up of the leaves and the flower. This is a plant in the rose family, for those of you who are not familiar with it. Also down in the drainages, I found a number of Texas mulberries or little leaf mulberries. And this is sort of interesting to me because when I was approached to do this plant list for Anne, they were kind of interested in learning more about the plants out there on the ranch partly because of the archaeological finds that have been made out there in terms of, what would ancient people have utilized plant-wise. Now, of course, these are extant plants, but if Texas mulberry existed when the indigenous peoples were moving through, it certainly would have been a good food plant because they do make really nice, tasty fruits. And on the right is a close-up of the flower. Another plant that occurs in the drainages, and I've never been able to find it in flower thus far. I hope after this rainy summer, maybe in the spring they'll be flowering for me. But this is Texas mountain laurel, Dermatophylla secundiflora. And then there's Mexican buckeye, Agnatia speciosa. This also occurs in those drainages. Occasionally, I'll find four-nerve daisy in the bottoms and other places as well, not solely in the bottoms of these drainages, but happened to find that one at that particular time. And then more Texas sotol, and then the foreground is agarita. There are some very, very large red-berry junipers down in the drainages. The one on the right was down there, and I don't know how tall this tree was, but it was a very large specimen. Red-berry juniper occurs in other parts of the property, on the slopes, but they're usually more like shrubs. And then on the left here is a a picture of a red-berry juniper that didn't make it. It was higher on the property, and I guess had less access to moisture. Along the sides of the arroyos, in rock ledges and crevices, it's common to see Epithelantha micromeris, which is the cactus on your right, and this is in fruit. That's common button cactus. On the left is cob cactus, Coryphantha tuberculosa, or Escobaria tuberculosa. It also is in fruit in this picture. A common vine that occurs in many places on the ranch, but a lot in and around the arroyos, is birdwing passion flower or passion vine, Passiflora tenuiloba. And you can see the flower on the, and you're talking about a flower about the size of a nickel or a dime. And then you can see the leaves on the slide in the left, which kind of looks like a bird wing, hence the name. Couple of kinds of mimosa. On the right is Mimosa borealis, a fragrant mimosa or pink flowered mimosa, which makes a really lovely landscaping plant because it's very fragrant as well as pretty. On the left is Mimosa aculeata carpa biuncifera, which is a mouthful. It's just cat claw mimosa, and I don't want that in my yard because it's I mean, it's pretty, you know, it smells good, but it's vicious. And then I'm kind of moving now to a different kind of habitat, although they all kind of merge into each other. There's no like clear-cut lines, but you know, there's a lot of areas of exposed bedrock. And within that bedrock, there are crevices and cracks, and there's many, many plants that grow up in there. In some places, the soil is very shallow on top of the bedrock, and so you get these really shallow rooted plants. So this is just more or less a habitat shot, but you can see blooming over here on the left is Mariola. We'll encounter that again. And another habitat shot of bedrock showing kind of more low terraces. In the background there, you can see a patch of Lechugia, Agave Lechugia, which Michael pointed out earlier as the indicator plant of our region. In the shallow soils on those bedrock regions, you find a lot of ocotillo. And, you know, I guess it shouldn't be surprising, but, you know, it was kind of surprising to me to see so much ocotillo north of Alpine. And on the, this is just kind of a weird picture. On the left here is an ocotillo coming up in the middle of a moor oak, which seems counterintuitive, but there you go. And these are a couple of cacti that you find in and around those shallow soils. The picture on the right is cat claw cactus, glandula cactus, uncinnatus variety wrightii. And here it is pictured in fruit, those bright red fruits. It's got a really gorgeous flower. It's kind of like a very tiny garnet jewel. And one day I'll catch it in flower. And on the other side of the slide is Mammillaria lasioacantha, or golf ball cactus. And I didn't realize how prolific this is on the ranch until just a few weeks ago when I was out there, and in the aftermath of all the rains they've had, it was everywhere. They're small, very, very tiny, and have a white flower that's early in the spring. But they just sink back down into the ground when it's dry. You don't see them. Here's a couple of different Coryphantha cactus. The one on the right is Coryphantha echinus, sea urchin cactus, and it's very common on the ranch in a lot of different habitats. Not so much where the limestone is crumbly and shifting, more in stable limestone situations. I put these up together because it's possible that they could be confused with each other, just you know, in a cursory glance. But the one on the left here is Coryphantha robustaspina variety shiri, or robustaspina robustaspina. It depends on what source you look at, but is, I think the common name is big needle nipple cactus or something crazy like that. And it's found more in places where there's a little bit deeper soil. So I found a number of these kind of up on the northern part of the ranch, closer to the only igneous outcrop that's on the property. And it's a little bit harder to find. It's a little bit less common than the sea urchin cactus. Another cactus that's very common on the ranch and is common on many limestone habitats throughout the Trans-Pecos region is Texas cone cactus, Neoloidea conoidea. That's always a fun one to say. And it's kind of, it's a great cactus. It's a small cactus, but sometimes it forms multiple stems. But it's kind of nice because during the summer season, it will bloom off and on during the season in response to rain. It doesn't have just one particular time when it blooms, like many of the other cactus do. I was surprised to find a patchy plume, Velugia paradoxa, growing in, whoa, that's big, in these shallow soils. I always associated it more with deeper soils, but it's quite common in the shallow soils there. Also a great landscaping plant, by the way. There are a number of species of what used to be the family Portulacaceae, the Portulaca family. That's been busted up because of molecular work, and we don't need to go into all that. But on the right is Fimaranthus, I think parviflora, parviflorus. And it's a very diminutive species that I haven't yet been able to photograph in flower. And then on the left is Kiss Me Quick, Portulaca pilosa, which is a very common annual, I believe, low-growing succulent that doesn't look this big in real life. Traviscantia wrightii, or Wright's spiderwort, is this purple flowered plant in the foreground. You can kind of see the Kiss Me Quick in the background, not blooming, but that's more, gives you more of a perspective of the size. Anyway, this is another plant that I had no idea was so prolific on the property until these recent rains, and it's just everywhere. And it's really gorgeous. But a small plant, diminutive, like 6 to 8 inches tall. A plant that's common on the bedrock, as well as other places on the ranch, is feather dahlia, Dahlia formosa. It's a gorgeous plant, and it didn't really bloom this spring like usual because it was so dry. So it's, taking advantage of the summer rains now. On the left is a plant in the 4 o'clock family. This is Burhavia linearifolia, and it's quite common all over the ranch. In this shot, it's growing up inside of a Dahlia formosa. So it looks like it's a shrub, but it's actually a very small perennial that comes up through the shrub. And then I'm kind of shifting now to sort of the quote unquote grasslands in the area. These are desert grasslands. And again, it's been very dry when these pictures were taken. So it's hard to picture them as grasslands, but the picture on the right is looking sort of southwest towards Alpine. You can see Twin Sisters, our kind of signature mountain, off in the distance. And on the left is a shot that toward the north from the igneous promontory that's on the northwest part of the branch. In the foreground, I think, is bee brush, but who knows? It's too dry to tell. But you can tell out there that desert grassland is, and probably you can't tell from this slide, but out there it's mostly creosote and tar bush, waiting for rain so that some grasses can come up. Here's a shot to the To the east, in the far distance, you can see the Glass Mountains, which are also limestone. And the promontory here in the mid-ground is called Squaw Tit. Yes, which is a name that's used for many peaks of that shape. When we do get rain, there are places on the ranch where the soils may be a little deeper, where there may be a little bit of a depression. And so water really collects there. And in this shot, this is just a bunch of the grasses that came up in profusion after some rains last summer. And it's a collection of grasses that includes tobosa, sandy muley, vine mesquite, you know, and et cetera, burrow grass. Some of the other grassland species that I encountered last year were Berlander's flax, the orange flowered, or Linum berlandieri, and on the left is rough Minodora, or Minodora scabra. It's not quite as showy as its relative Minodora longiflora, which is called showy Minodora. And I don't have a picture of that. I do have a picture, but it didn't make it in the show. Species that can show up in disturbances and sometimes in grasslands that you know, have opportunistic plants come up is the one on the right is oak leaf datura, Datura quercifolia. It's a very pretty plant. It's an annual, but it can be kind of aggressive in reseeding itself. And then on the left here is white 4 o'clock, another member of the 4 o'clock family. And you can see in the center here are the fruits of that plant. And in that family, the 4 o'clock family, the fruits are known as anthocarps. And the features of those can be very, very compelling especially if you look at them under a microscope. And there's a close-up of the white 4 o'clock there with some kind of, I think that's a bee of some sort, or I mean, a fly of some sort. And then the yellow flowered is the ubiquitous paper flower, Celostrophe tagetina, which is pretty common across the region, not just in grassland situations, but in this particular instance, it was associated with that. And then on the right is Texas rainbow cactus, which occurs not only in the grassland areas, but in many other habitats around the ranch. It's yellow flowered. I don't know if I included a picture of it in flower in this talk. The picture on the left is Coryphantha macromeris, big needle. It's another one of those big needle nipple cactus names. It has a very, very beautiful, bright magenta flower or dark pink flower. In the summertime, I haven't caught it in flower yet, but you can see it in fruit in this picture. You can see the brown on top is the remains of the flower, and the green fruit is beneath. This is sort of a comparative picture of two different species of echinocactus. The one with the bright red fruit is Echinocactus texensis. Texas, what's it called, Michael? Horse crippler, thank you. And the one on the right is eagle claw cactus. And they can superficially be mistaken for each other, but they typically have different habitats. Texas horse crippler is usually in deeper soils in more grassland areas, whereas horse crippler is more often found on gravelly slopes, not necessarily all the time, but they both have pink flowers. Horse crippler usually blooms a lot earlier than eagle claw. Eagle claw blooms a little bit later in the spring or early summer. And these are both in fruit right now. And obviously, horse crippler has a really bright red prominent fruit. Eagle claw, the fruits are down inside all those hairs and they're pink. And if you try to collect seeds from it, you better have a spoon with you because they dehiss or come apart at the bottom of the fruits. If you pull it off, they're all going to run down the cactus. This is a shot of one of the deeper soil swales, is a word I'm going to use, where a lot of the grasses are really prolific after the rains. These areas also include a lot of shrubs like little leaf sumac, bee brush, lote bush, mesquite, things of that nature. But in the right-hand picture is a dense stand of tobosa grass, Hilaria or Pleurophis mutica. And in the left-hand picture is vine mesquite, which is which is grass that you see in a lot of places where there's deeper soils and some moisture that sticks around for a little while. Hopea obtusa. Whoopsie. Okay. The picture on the right is in this particular grassy swale is Bothriocloa alta, tall beard grass or tall blue stem. It's a big, you know, Bothriocloa, that genus, can either be called beard grass or blue stem, and there's a lot of different species. This one happens to get very, very tall, hence tall beard grass. And it just happens to be a really lovely grass. The one on the left is our state grass, Bouteloua curtipendula or Sidotes grama. And there are a number of other grasses that, I mean, there's a big list of grasses on this property, but I'm limited it to just a few. On the right is Mariola. When it's a plant that is a native plant, but when in disturbed soils, it can become quite aggressive and overbearing. And it is common all over the ranch, except for on the gravelly kinds of slopes. On the left is a relative of woolly butterfly bush. It's Buddleia scordioides or escobilla. It's kind of a rhizomatous, woody, sort of small colonizing plant associated with grasslands. Now, this is a comparative slide. On the left rather, is Mariola, Parthenium incanum, and on the right is Parthenium argentanum or Waiuli. And I'm going to show a little bit later the difference in habitat between these two. I'm comparing them because even though in these slides they look quite different, in some situations when you're out in the field, they can be easily confused with each other because the flowers are very similar. But Mariola, the one on the left, oh, I'm running out of time and I haven't even hardly started. Vines, there's some vines in the grasslands. There's Clematis drummondii, old man's beard or virgin bower. Huh? Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, well, shucks, okay. And then on the left is a really awful picture of Gregg's blue mist flower, which is a beautiful plant. The photograph doesn't do it justice, but it crops up in a number of different habitats. In this particular instance, it's in one of these swales. On the right is bee brush, and it was just last summer after the rains had started, it was just glorious. I mean, this is a weedy shrub, to be sure. I mean, a native shrub, but a weedy shrub. But it's when it blooms, it is extremely fragrant and can be really pretty. On the left is lote bush. Most people don't, I shouldn't say most, many people don't appreciate lote bush because it's real stickery. But when it is in flower, and you can just barely see the flowers in this picture, they're small and yellow. When it's in flower, it is a mecca for insects. And we have some on our property that we've kept and pruned up so that they don't stick you in the eye. But when they're in flower, the insects are just all over it. I mean, you could spend, quite a bit of time just standing there and watching all the different kinds that come and go. And it also has these blue-black fruits that you can kind of see in the picture. And they're actually quite tasty. It's got a big seed in the middle, so you don't want to chomp down on it, but you can suck the pulp off and spit the seed out and get more lote bush. This is a comparative shot between creosote on the right and tarbush on the left. And I don't know if, you know, when I was first starting out, when I would be driving down the highway and see a mixture of these two in a big flat, you know, going, you know, on the side of the highway, I couldn't tell them apart. And, you know, now of course I can. But creosote, the one on the right, is in the family Zygophyllaceae, and the flowers, the caltrop family, and the flowers are in series of 5. So 5 petals, 5 sepals, and I think 10 stamens, is that right? And then, but tarbush, the one on the left, is in the sunflower family, Asteraceae. And this is a picture of the flower in bud, and inside in that flower, there are multiple flowers, as is common with the sunflower family. And there are other differences between them too. Maybe I was just a slow learner. Some other members of the sunflower family are the ever-present skeleton leaf goldeneye, which is on the right. It's a beautiful shrub, makes a really nice landscape plant, and gives you a lot of bang for your buck because it blooms all summer long. The one on the left is a low-growing kind of spreading plant that is very ubiquitous. It's Xanthusma spinulosa or something like that, spiny golden weed. Another vine that you'll see growing in the grasslands or clambering up into shrubs is slenderleaf globeberry, Ibervillea tenuisecta, and it's not much to look at until it makes fruit, and then these bright red like Christmas balls are just, you can see them if you're driving down the highway, if this is growing on a fence or something. Now, in some places in these open flat areas where there's a little more deeper soil, more clay, more silt, it's not uncommon to see night blooming cereus. And this is a cactus, and I haven't caught it in bloom yet. This was the one on the right. It was taken a couple of years ago, and when it was very, very dry. And just driving down the road out there, I saw maybe 5 or 6 plants that were not much bigger than this. So it got a beautiful white flower. Michael showed a picture of one in flower in his talk. And when it does produce fruit, they're giant red fruits, and you can't miss them. But you can see in the foreground, there's a writing pen to give you a sense of the size. On the left here is a different species of cactus, of Opuntia. This is one of the complex of purple prickly pears. You know, and if I'm not done when you're done, that's okay. This is Opuntia comanchica. I think maybe the common name is Comanche prickly pear. And it's quite common around the ranch, as is Engelmann's prickly pear. A couple of different species of yucca. On the right is Yucca elata, or soap tree yucca. And it's pictured here in one of those densely vegetated swales. It's usually in deeper soils because it is a rhizomatous yucca. It has underground stems. And the one on the left is Yucca torii, which does not grow like that. And it's usually in shallower soils or rocky soils. We have a yucca expert here with us today, Karen Clary. I can see her from here. She did her dissertation on yuccas. And then there's I'm going to end up without the time for some of the cool plants, but these are just some shots of those limestone hills, because now I'm going to show you some of the plants that occur around the aprons or the bottom part of these limestone hills where there's crumbly limestone, including a lot of interesting fossils. One of the grasses that can be seen in this habitat is Bigelow's desert grass, Blepharodacne bigelovii, which is another one that's fun to say. And if you were to grab this, it would stick your hands. The leaves are very sharp on the ends. An interesting milkweed that occurs with a lot more commonly than I originally thought is Bear Mountain milkweed or stalked milkweed, Asclepias scaposa. I have not caught it in flower, obviously. This one on the right, I just missed, and the one on the left is in fruit. You can see the follicle kind of perpendicular to the stem. Whoopsie. Let me go back. Okay, a couple of really common plants that occur in these limestone, either ledges or crumbly slopes, is Polygala or Hebecarpa macrodinea, gland leaf milkwort. It's all over the Trans-Pecos, and it's just a tiny little shrub with little jewel-like flowers. And then this in the Rubiaceae or Mater family is needle leaf bluet. This is a kind of an interesting plant that there's one hill on the ranch that I've looked at so far that is got this plant in profusion. It's Talenopsis frutescens or arroyo flameflower. Another one of those species that got segregated out from the family Portulacaceae. But anyway, the flower on the left was taken in cultivation in the greenhouse because I haven't caught it in flower in habitat yet. Ruellia perrii, the plant on the left, is a member of the Acanthaceae or the Acanthus family. Very common around the ranch, very pretty little plant. And I didn't get the leaves in this shot, but the flower's the good part anyway. On the right, or on the left here is, it's called prostrate blue milkweed. I don't know why it's called that because it's usually upright when I see it. There's a couple of different species of Hedioma or false pennyroyal. Very, very fragrant, very aromatic leaves in the Lamiaceae or the mint family. And here's a couple of species in the forget-me-not family, the Boraginaceae. There are two different species of Techelia. The one on the right is Techelia gregii or plume Techelia. It's a very pretty little small-leafed gray desert shrub that is beautiful when it blooms. And the one on the left is, I think it's called woody crinkle mat. It's Techelia canescens and makes a nice little ground cover. Plateau rock trumpets are really showing off this fall, and I need to go back and try to collect fruits this fall of this one. Very pretty and very fragrant rhizomatous or colony forming plant, Mandevilla macrosiphon. On the left is another species in the Acanthaceae or the Acanthus family. It's Carlorhizia mexicana, Mexican Carlo wort, I think is the common name. And the flowers are little bitty, and I have had a heck of a time getting a decent picture of that. Michael had a picture of the plant on the right, shaggy Stenandrium, Stenandrium barbatum. It's another member of the Acanthaceae, very common in the ranch and very common on limestone substrates all over the Trans-Pecos, as is the plant on the left, the Coulter's desert rose mallow. Is a member of the mallow family, and it's a really pretty summer bloomer. Now, this is kind of an esoteric thing. The plant on the right, which doesn't look like much, was really exciting to me because I'd never seen it before. I'd heard about it. It's Porophyllum gregii, or Greg's poor leaf. And it's again, a sort of a non-aggressive colony-forming member of the Asteraceae or the sunflower family. And this is just post-blooming. And, you know, I know, big deal, right? But I was really excited about it. And it's quite common in that particular substrate around the aprons, so to speak, of the mountains. Plant on the left is a beautiful small shrub, Azuratina wrightii, or right snake root, a really, really nice plant for attracting pollinators. And then there are 2 different species of zinnia on the property. The white flowered one is Zinnia acerosa, one that you commonly find on limestone substrates, small perennials. And on the left, or on the right, the left on the screen is Zinnia grandiflora, plains zinnia, which is much more common in a lot of different habitats. I was kind of surprised to find it on the limestone there, actually. I usually find it in, you know, more grassy type areas. Texas green lily occurs quite commonly on the property. This is now in the family do you know the plant name? Melaniaceae or something. Used to be in the lily family, but it's not anymore. Anyway, Cremeria or white ratany this was taken in the spring of 2019, and dry as it was in bloom everywhere and smelled heavenly. Apparently it's a semi-parasite, and it's difficult to grow. I mean, I've grown it from seed, but it doesn't persist because I guess it has to have some other plant to, you know, feed off of, for lack of a better way to putting it. Anyway, there's blue bowls on the right, a member of the phlox family, and tubular blue stars, Amsonia longiflora, on the left, quite common in the spring. 2 different species of Castanea. There's Castanea sessiliflora or dusky paintbrush, and then rigid paintbrush on the other side. And they're hemiparasitic as well on different species. This is Phaerocactus hematocanthus, or giant fishhook cactus. And it's yellow flowered and very beautiful when it blooms. Again, I haven't, Rainbow cactus, spiny greasewood, Leucophyllum minus, Big Ben silverleaf is another common plant on that ranch and very pretty. Don't need to stop?
Pretty much.
Okay. All right. Well.
If you have questions for Patty, catch her during the break.
Yeah. Sorry. Oh, I got carried away.